when we make peace between Saudi Arabia and Israel. The whole Middle East changes. This is an extraordinary change, a monumental change.
In September of 2023, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claimed his country was on the cusp of a dramatic breakthrough that would create a truly new Middle East. This was a historic peace deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia, one of the most powerful countries in the region. It was also going to bring huge economic benefits to the two countries, and crucially for the United States, closer relations between its key partners in the Middle East. But just 2 weeks later, hopes of peace in the Middle East collapsed. Before Israel and Saudi Arabia began negotiations, the US brokered the Abraham Accords in 2020.
The Trump administration said very firmly that if there are countries that are willing to sign a peace agreement with Israel, the United States would try and give them something in return. And in the context of this, we saw the agreements with the UAE, with Bahrain, and then subsequently with Sudan and Morocco as well. And this was really, I think, a first step of trying to create this Arab-Israeli alliance in 2020.
In May 2022, the UAE and Israel signed a free trade agreement that saw tariffs removed or reduced for 96% of the goods. Trade volume between the two countries grew by 106% that year, reaching a record $2.5 billion. But according to a survey by a pro-Israel American think tank, public support for establishing normal diplomatic relations with Israel is very unpopular in the Middle East. Roughly 80% have a very negative or somewhat negative view of the Abraham Accords.
Netanyahu very quickly after the Abraham Accords, of course, reversed his permanent commitment not to annex the West Bank. I think that those agreements, the Abraham Accords, though, were never really primarily about Palestine, but really directed to developing pragmatic partnerships with Israel and strengthening Gulf security relationships with Washington, D.C.
For the Biden administration, the crown jewel of normalization efforts was supposed to be a mega deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel.
First of all, in terms of legitimacy, a peace with Saudi Arabia would undoubtedly open the doors for ties with other Muslim-dominated countries. Then on a strategic level, Saudi Arabia, together with Israel, would form a bulk of a very powerful alliance in the region, very much concerned with the rise of Iran and its proxies, such as the Houthis in Yemen, and of course Hezbollah in the north, but the core, of course, being Iran. And of course, finally, as far as Israel is concerned, there are many economic opportunities.
Israel has a massive high-tech sector, accounting for 18% of the country's GDP. Nearly half of all Israeli exports in 2022 were high-tech products and services worth $71 billion. But the industry is heavily dependent on foreign investment. In 2022, up to 80% of venture capital investments came from foreign funds. Saudi Arabia also has big ambitions when it comes to diversifying away from oil and driving innovation. Does the Saudi economy need Israel?
Well, yes and no, but Saudi Arabia has embarked on a very ambitious economic diversification program known as Vision 2030. Saudi Arabia intends to gradually reduce its reliance on oil and build up its private sector. There is capital that can come from abroad, from Israel, but also from beyond in the United States.
Defense is potentially a big area of collaboration between the two states. Israel's defense exports saw a significant peak after the Abraham Accords, reaching a record $12.5 billion in 2022. According to the Defense Ministry, 24% of those exports went to its new Abraham Accord partners.
Ties with Israel would also provide Saudi Arabia, and especially the monarchy, with an extra clout that it requires in light of Iran's expansion into Iraq, into Lebanon, and into Yemen as well. So both sides had a lot to gain from it.
President Biden was enthusiastic to make this happen.
For the United States, integration and connectivity and diplomacy among America's partners in the region, that is seen to be a positive.
For the United States in the Middle East to have an Israeli-Saudi deal would serve really a key purpose of having a very strong strategic alliance that is tied to US interests.
If the US manages to build an agreement between Saudi Arabia, Israel, and other Abraham Accord countries, it gets to build an economic corridor in the Middle East, and strategically important waterways such as the Strait of Hormuz, the Mandeb Strait, and the Suez Canal will be surrounded by America's partners. But all that was thrown into disarray when Hamas attacked Israel on the 7th of October 2023, setting off another round of conflict in the Middle East. Do you think the Palestinian issue is a deal breaker for Saudi Arabia?
I think in the current context of today, yes, I do think it is. I think it will be optically very difficult for the leadership in Saudi Arabia.
In November 2023, an extraordinary summit between the Arab League and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation took place in Riyadh. Leaders of Muslim-majority countries, including a delegation from Iran, released a statement condemning Israeli forces and demanded a ceasefire.
The terminology that came out was the terminology that would be expected. But I think what is more significant is actually what did not come out, and especially if we compare it to some historical examples. In the 1973 Arab-Israeli War, there was the famous oil embargo and oil shock. We saw nothing of that, and there were no intimations, although several countries have the capacity to do that.
Details of a call between President Biden and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in October 2023 revealed both leaders' commitment to working towards sustainable peace between Israelis and Palestinians. But the international community is severely divided on what a sustainable peace would look like.
I would find it very difficult to see a normalization that would not include any kind of Palestinian dimension to it, particularly now that the Israelis and the international community, frankly, will need somebody to govern Gaza after the war. We will have literally millions of Palestinians that will need aid. They will need to restore their homes. They will need to send their children back to schools. Hospitals will need to be restored.
In thinking of a political settlement on Palestine, there is this historic opportunity on the back of de-escalation, normalization, and reconciliation in the Middle East to have regional states bear some degree of responsibility. Key elections are taking place, particularly in the United States and the United Kingdom and beyond. So that means that the bandwidth for two key players will be reduced. Again, this is an opportunity for regional countries, particularly the Gulf, particularly Saudi Arabia, but also many players to step up and step in.